Hello, welcome back to Lorehammer. This week of your plastic crack addiction, we are bringing the man who started it all for me, anyways, down this long journey of hobby addiction. So it's a very serious episode. I know Christian has been suffering with his plastic crack addiction for almost as long as I have, maybe even longer. Welcome, Christian.
Yeah, I feel like this is a rehab episode we're doing here, an intervention.
Yeah. And the big hitter that we have on, the guy, like I said, that got it started for me anyways, Alessio Cavatore. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited, man. A quick little background on you. You are part of, or we're part of Games Workshop, and you were right around the era when me and Christian got into it. And you're involved primarily, from what I see, was Lord of the Rings, but you dabbled a lot in fantasy and 40K, and you had a bunch of other little projects with them too. It seemed like you were with them for almost 20 years, maybe
15 years.
Okay. Yeah. Like that's a long time to be with a company doing something. So you had a lot of influence on the company. I'm very excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I've done quite a lot of stuff there. Yes. I started as a translator in 1996. Yeah, wow. Long time ago.
What were you translating it to?
I was going for, I went to England from Italy just after university to translate Warhammer 4th edition from English to Italian, because they were doing an Italian, Games Workshop Italy. So yeah, that was the first job.
Oh, I always loved picking up those different language codexes and seeing what rules changed. I liked seeing all the High Gothic and like seeing it in different languages sometimes. Like, yeah, very cool.
If any rules changed, clearly they were not doing a good job, right? Of being because a translator shouldn't really change things.
I found a change in a Russian codex one time, and I lost the game because of it. But that's neither here nor there.
Yes, sometimes. That's what literally translating things made me speak to all the game designers, because we were based in England, in Nottingham, in the same place where the studio was. So we had the advantage that we could go to talk to Andy Chambers, Jervis Johnson, Rick Priestley, etc., and basically get the truth from them. The advantage was that they got to know me. They got to know I was a keen gamer, played my games. I wrote some stuff for books that were published. The Dogs of War, the first Warhammer Dogs of War book, I wrote a little bit of background bits in there based on Italian mercenary captains' historical things. And so when the position of game developer came up after about a year, they knew me, they knew I knew my stuff, that I could write in English. So yeah, they offered me the job, and it was like, yay. That's how it started.
So you were a fan first, and then you got to work with them.
Yeah, first I was a gamer. I thought I didn't have time for these things at university, but then I broke my leg in a freak accident, and I basically had a lot of time to play toy soldiers, and so I played a lot of Warhammer. I won the Italian tournament. Small affair, of course, at that time. But I won the tournament, which means I met Gianpaolo Brisigotti, who was setting up Games Workshop Italy, and now is the owner, big boss of Battlefront Games, Flames of War, that kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
So, that's how it started.
It must be so crazy looking at 40K now, as opposed to back then. Like, we're now, or 40K is now like a worldwide phenomenon type thing. Like everyone seems to know about it. We're getting Amazon TV shows, all these kind of things. What a different world we're in than when you were kind of heavily involved.
Yes, definitely. 40K and fantasy were smaller. And in Europe, I think fantasy always felt or was indeed bigger than 40K, unlike in the UK and in the US. But yes, certainly it was a smallish business at the time, but yes, it grew into this international huge thing now. Yes.
Yeah. Are you still playing any Games Workshop products, or like I know now you're working with like White Horse,
River Horse? Yes.
River Horse. So like, do you dabble, or is that like cheating on your current company?
No, not quite. It's just I wish I had time, to be honest, because I still have armies. I still have my Eldar. I still have my Imperial Guard. I still have my Skaven. So the armies are there, but unfortunately, I rarely get to use them because I think since 2010, because I worked for Games Workshop from 96 to 2010, Then 2010 to 2024, River Horse, like you said, I made the company, ran the company for 14 years. So that 15 years Games Workshop, 14 years at River Horse, and now I sold River Horse just last year. So now I'm a consultant, cool. And it's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
A free agent.
Yes.
Yeah. Pop in here, do something cool here, pop in over there.
Yes,
cool.
Absolutely. A mercenary. That's the way I like to think. A freelance. The traditional meaning of a freelance. You sell your lance as a mercenary captain to the highest bidder, which is cool.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you've kind of mentioned almost two historical-y things like Italian sergeants and then now this freelance. All you guys just seem like you're deep in that historical game, you know?
Yes. Yeah, like, because I'm an old guy now, it's a classic transition. When you're younger, you play fantasy, science fiction, and as you get older, you transition to historical. You know, it seems to be the path of the wargamer.
The path of the wargamer.
That seems to be the
case. It's a lonely path.
It
traveled often alone, but
I've recently done more historical, I think, than others have. I don't know if you're familiar with bolt action for Warlord Games. Sure. So I'm doing so much World War II stuff recently for the last quite a few years now. So we're on 3rd edition bolt action. Yeah, but going back to your original question, I haven't played a lot of Games Workshop games recently for quite a few years. I mean, occasionally maybe a little League of Blood Bowl, which I still think is a great game.
Cool.
Probably the best game that I ever seen from a Games Workshop offer. I have played a Warhammer 6th edition tournament. Somebody invited me, which was a blast from the past. It was really funny. But I haven't played 40k in a long, long time. Yeah, other than on a computer. I mean, I play computer games, 40k, but not tabletop recently.
Yeah, you did you dabble in Space Marine too?
Not Space Marine. No, I'm playing older games because they're cheaper. At some point, when Space Marine will become cheaper, I'm sure I will.
Okay,
we'll get to it eventually.
Put it on that wish list. I'm sure we can get our Patreons to buy you a copy of Space Marine too. So come on, people, donate. We could get this man playing with us. Yeah, like what really caught me and I wanted to talk to you about was definitely Lord of the Rings stuff. We're primary 40k stuff, but man, I got into Games Workshop through Lord of the Rings when I was 13 type situation. I came in right around 2002, right in between Two Towers and The Return of the King, kind of that edition jump.
Wow. And
I got the new box set that came out with like Minus Tirith Warriors, and I hadn't seen the movie, so no idea what they were, but they were fucking cool.
Right.
So talking to you kind of is super cool because the models and the lore and those rule books, man, like I remember learning to play Lord of the Rings rules and it was super simple, very like intuitive, like you move into people. Oh, spears, they can reach farther. Oh, put your shields in the front. If you're shooting bows, you want to shoot over somebody's shoulder, like just kind of stuff that like had a very cool model to mechanic kind of transition there. Yeah, like how did you get involved in Lord of the Rings? Did that come up on the bulletin board and you quickly snagged and hand up, let me do this, or how?
At the time I had done the core rulebook for 40k 5th edition and the Warhammer 7th, I think. So I had done the two main core books and quite a number of codexes, army books, etc. And when the Lord of the Rings project came about and I found out that we had a license and so we could make games and stuff, Rick was the big cheese at the time. He had like director level designer guy, and basically said, I'm gonna write this. But I was like, Rick, Tolkien for me, as he knew, Tolkien for me is kind of the closest I have in my life to a religion, really. Therefore, that's pretty much it. Yeah, and so I just went, can I help? And effectively, when we designed the game, Rick was the lead designer, myself and all the other guys in games development, so Andy Chambers, Jervis, Gavin Thorpe, we all worked together as a team to help Rick. However, because of my fanatical zealotry on this, I then, Rick, when the core design was done, he just went, and it's yours. Here's the ball, run with it. So I inherited the system. I got a job title, which was hilarious. My official job title on my job description was Ring Bearer. And so I was given a ring of power and continue this game and expand it and develop it. So basically after the first version, so the Fellowship of the Ring, then we did the Two Towers, which probably when the first one you've seen, and then the Return of the King. By then I was in charge of the system, and I then did the compiled final version, because we did the 3 editions with the movies, and then at the end we did, and now the definitive big hardback book. And so I was in charge of that. And I think the coolest thing there was actually when it came to designing supplements for it, because the idea was like, what do? We do armies, because you think like, you do a book on the armies of the elves, a book on the armies of the orcs, which would have been more like Warhammer, kind of the same principle of a codex army book. And instead we went, no, because there was all this good and evil, very strong philosophy there, we went, okay, now let's explore an area. And within that area, there would be both good and evil forces, and we bring them together from different locations. So that's I think, Shadow and Flame, the first supplement, was really actively creating what is a supplement for Lord of the Rings, and how is it different from the ones for the other systems. Also encouraging people to collect not one force, but at least 2, a good and an evil force, to bring to a tournament, to play the same scenario from both sides. So there was very much a yin-yang, good-evil philosophy that I tried to carry across the whole system and the supplements.
Yeah, I love that. Like, everyone's encouraged, especially in tournaments. It's pretty much you're bringing your good and your evil faction. 40K, it can be, Lord of the Rings can be so narrative driven that it only makes sense that you bring your good, you bring your bad. Usually those are going to be facing off each other, even though they never do on tabletop because they're both your armies. But cool.
Do they still do that?
Man, every time I see tournaments and stuff, they encourage you to bring both
Oh,
armies.
Wow, cool.
You play.
That's amazing. Think about, I started that myself. It was my idea in distant, 2001, 2, 3, something like that, and it's still happening 20 years later.
Yeah,
Hey!
that's awesome, man. I love that.
Cool.
That's so funny. Good for you, man. Good for you. You're really just changing that gaming world out there.
Nice.
Fucking tight.
Nice to hear.
It is nice, man.
By the way, look at my t-shirt.
That's nice.
Did you get that for working on it as like a gift?
I don't remember where's this from, but still, yeah.
So you're obviously a huge Tolkien fan already.
Very much.
Yeah. So that's cool that you got to live your dream and like actually start to implement things. Those supplements you guys came up with, I was a huge fan of, well, still am a huge fan of those supplements, because they explored like stuff outside. Most people are, there's the books and everything, but then you have a whole new audience that got introduced through Peter Jackson's movies. But then you guys found a way to bring both like the deep lore out of the Tolkien, or out of the Jackson movies, and explore these other factions you didn't really see on screen. But they still felt like they were part of that. They felt very cohesive, the way that everything was designed to work together. So all the elements that like Games Workshop added at the time, like when you were there, really meshed well with like the Jackson verse aesthetic. But you were pulling things out of the deep lore, which I totally loved.
Yeah, it was an interesting, fascinating process, really, that because the license was both for the movies but also for the books, or some parts of the books, through the Tolkien Enterprises at the time. They owned the rights. So there was a degree of, you can pick some sections of the books, the appendixes, etc., and draw from there to add to the purely cinematic IP. And so basically, it was convenient for me because I obviously knew my Tolkien. And like you say, very exciting the fact that also we got to be in the movie as extras. We went to New Zealand, and it was mind-blowingly incredible. So cool. I actually managed to slightly influence the movie as well, which was fantastic. And
you're gonna have to expand on that.
Feeding a few suggestions to Peter Jackson, that was very good. The kind of delving into the lore and kind of going, could we do this creature? Can we do this other creature? But obviously trying to respect the lore, not to create things that wouldn't fit. Goblins would explode with fire weapons, firearms. You're going to go, no. But so starting to respect the spirit of, and we always had to work with the licensor, of course, and propose our new things and get them to approve them. But it was quite a good process because, again, we were respecting the IP. We were not going weird and
Inserting all your
out.
own crazy thoughts and stuff.
It's funny that you talk about that, respecting the IP, and you did a good job with that. Games Workshop currently does not have that same respect. I feel like the design of the models, like they came out with this hill troll, and when I first seen it, I'm like, oh, that's a cool Age of Sigmar model. And then only after I read about it do I realize it's Lord of the Rings. It just has this very different, almost like cartoonish, almost like goofy look that, all the Lord of the Rings stuff never quite had before. It was way more serious and less cartoony looking.
Well, to be honest, I haven't seen pretty much anything since 2010, so I couldn't comment on that.
Well,
I can talk about the past, not so much the present.
Let me just see if I can pull up a picture here. But you guys can talk about something.
What role were you in the movie? Like, can we see you on screen? Are you?
You can in the extended version. In the extended version of the Return of the King, there's a scene where Pippin is looking for Merry on the field of battle on Pelennor Field after the battle, and you see his feet. So basically, the actor is looking down, and then the camera switches to his feet, and his feet are walking, and you can see the elven cloak. So Merry's elven cloak, and Pippin runs to it, and basically lying dead around the elven cloak is me, Alan Perry, Michael Perry, and Brian Nelson. So the three sculptors and myself as Riders of Rohan, completely massacred by Uruk-hai and probably stomped on by a Mumak. So we're lying dead, and he picks up the cloak, and then his foot goes right past my head, there. So no, there was incredible experience, and the Perrys have sculpted the four of us onto the base of the Mumak. So on the actual base of the Mumak, I assume it's still on sale, that model. I don't think they resculpted it, but that Mumak base, you can see the four of us there lying flat on the ground. It was an incredible experience, meeting all the cast and the director and Richard Taylor of Weta. So
very cool. Yeah, that'd be so cool to that's just a nerd's dream, I think, honestly, to be involved in any Lord of the Rings stuff.
It was mystical.
Just go back real quick to that one model I was mentioning. This is some Lord of the Rings model, this hill troll and these two orcs, but it just doesn't have that same vibe in my mind that you guys were making.
This is based on the War of the Rohirrim.
Yeah.
So it's based on the manga, kind of anime version. Yeah. Right. So I guess it's a different style, but I mean, the anime itself is a different style, different take. Yeah. Some people hated it because, what has manga anime got to do with Tolkien? I liked it. It reminded me, it's a mix of two things I love. One is Hayao Miyazaki. I don't know if you're familiar with the Studio Ghibli anime, which I think are pure art, pure poetry. And, reminded me a bit of that and Tolkien. So two things I love mixed together. I didn't have a problem. I'm not a purist, I guess. But I can see other people having a problem with it, and it looked like those models, I guess, try to capture the anime style, so that they are a little different.
Yeah, and it's fine, like you said, it's kind of just personal preference. It's different style. And I just like your guys' style from the early 2005s. That Shadow in the East supplement, like you see all these. What the heck are they called? Not the Eastling, but the other faction, the Can or something.
Southrons, Haradrim.
Yeah, like all that.
Haradrim does Southrons.
You made whole factions that were in the books and stuff, but not in the movies, and they came out perfect often. I loved it.
We did Variags of Kand. Yeah, it's funny how going through Tolkien, even Pelennor Field, Tolkien is incredibly skilled at with one line, one name to evoke, your brain imagines the most glorious things, but actually in terms of actual facts, there is very little, which was great because, I remember, and the Axemen of Lossarnach, and all the men of Lebanon and the Knights of Dol Amroth. It's like, does he describe them anywhere? Well, there's a reference to shining helmets over there, but that's about it. So there are all these glorious names, or the Variags of Kand, these barbarians and stuff. We kind of go, what were they about? So Axemen of Lossarnak. Well, give them axes, but that's all we know. So it was very interesting trying to kind of work out something based on those names, so that had to represent the names. So
yeah.
Kind of thing.
Was there anything in the movies that you were particularly excited to try to transition into the game, like any scene or battle or anything? Any kind of like mechanic that you wanted to try to implement?
I think the most curious thing that anecdote that springs to mind straight away for me was Tom Bombadil, which is not in the movie, is in the film, but it was this character that completely breaks all the rules. Is completely out of sync with everything. The ring has no power at all over him. It's completely it's different tone, different. So there's a lot of debate in Tolkien fan ways. Who is he? The very different theories. And is he Tolkien himself? Is he a joke? Is he actually the creator god, Eru Ilúvatar, that is just retired, is watching Middle Earth going, interesting. So he's like, Middle Earth is his television, is his daytime television from when he's retired. So there's all this theory. And I remember in the book, when we actually had to make the model, and I was like, how do you write rules for somebody like that, which is above and breaks all the rules? So we actually were quite radical, and I just went, how about we put question marks on all the stats? and so we did, and he obviously is a bit goofy and out there, but I think it kept again in the spirit of very strange thing that is just an inexplicable thing there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was fun.
Yeah.
Which we picked up later on in the My Little Pony role-play game. We did something very similar, but anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
We will get there. Yeah. That's so funny. Did you try to incorporate, like, did you take any rule from Lord of the Rings and kind of carry it on through other games? Like one rule that you really liked that you're just like, that has to be a key mechanic of all tabletop games? Or do you kind of design all your games very differently?
Well, one tries to not to copy literally, but of course a lot of rules are born out of creating a rule, trying it for a few years on the tabletop, and then thinking, actually, this could be improved by doing this. So some ideas are completely new. For example, Bolt Action has a lot of completely new stuff in it, at least as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure that has been done before, because that's actually very funny when I design games, and I often compare notes with Rick Priestley, and I think I had a great innovative idea, and goes, nobody's ever thought of this thing. Look, what about this mechanic, Rick? And he goes, well, in 1972, this was in this particular game, blah, blah, blah. And I just go, I wasn't born.
That's so funny.
Damn.
I think Rick is too humble. I only talked to him for an hour, but I don't think he gave himself enough credit for how like on top and influential, and just even, like you said, pulling out random facts like that. He's on it.
Rick is my sensei. He is the one that I learned, I think, probably the most from, and I like to say my friend. And like I say, way I say Jervis is my senpai, like the teacher and the senior colleague that helped me.
You really earned the anime thing, eh?
Yes. Well, yes. I have some strong links with Japan. Yes. Including my wife. Yes.
Okay.
Quite a lot of Japanese culture here. But yes, I completely forgot what we were talking about. So, yes.
What was it like working with like some of those guys? Were you guys all pretty close? Like I know you, Jervis, and Rick were close, but like how much branching out to other kind of? Did you go talk to the modelers? Did you go talk to other people in the team, the White Dwarf guys? Like,
yes. I mean, other people that were very influential in my career, I would say Tuomas Pirinen. He was my first boss. I worked for him on Warhammer to start with, and again, I learned from it. I worked with Andy Chambers, with Gavin Thorpe. There was the people that were there when I started. Later on, with people like Phil Kelly, Graham McNeil, Anthony Reynolds, people that are kind of like more like they came. I was their senior colleague, but still we worked together for many years, and we have still very good relationship with Matt Ward, speaking of Lord of the Rings, Adam Troke, people like that. But yes, as well as the game designer that I mentioned, yes, at the time the studio was a smaller thing. it was, I think, from what the people that I know that still work against Russia now, a lot of the departments have been kind of separated because the company is much bigger, obviously. But at the time, it was a smaller thing, so we kind of were all in the same room effectively. And that obviously meant there was an easier way, I guess, of interacting with the different people that worked on the. So maybe you would create a project team on a particular book or project, and you would have a game designer, one or more game designers, one or more illustrators, one or more sculptors, and some useless management person, and then and then together we would work as a team. And so there was a cross-pollination influence between piece of artwork, I describe a rule, somebody draws a picture, and then somebody just goes, oh, I gave him a huge claw, do you mind? That sounds cool, that looked cool. I was like, absolutely, let me write a rule for it. So there was that kind of mix of creativity working together, which is cool. It was a nice process.
No, that's perfect, all being in the same room. Like, that doesn't happen nowadays, man. And there's that magical element when you got 5 guys in a room just brainstorming, you know. That'd be such a fun, creative environment. I'm sure it's just buzzing.
It was great, and I find some of that still in some smaller companies that I work with as a consultant when we work on projects. So and of course, like all things, it's got advantages and disadvantages. But yeah, I mean, Games Workshop at the moment is huge, so obviously, I guess it's more difficult to put all these people together. You know, also after COVID, a lot of people work remotely in different parts of the world, even. So it's obviously slightly more difficult to put everybody in the same room, right?
Yeah. What do you think makes a game kind of feel immersive? Like, what do you think makes a game enjoyable? Like, do you like making the people know they're playing a game, or do you like kind of making it feel seamless, like kind of put people in the game, the gamers kind of the model's boots, you know?
Well, I mean, two things here. One is I feel that the rules normally have to come second, which is, I guess, strange for a game designer to say, but I think you start from the model, the story, from the story and the model that it represents. The story is more important because I think the IP is what makes people want to play, what brings people back to play. Of course, if the game system flows and works and is enjoyable, great. But if the rule shouldn't get in the way of that. I think the rule should service the IP, not the other way around. Obviously, one tries to make sure that both the rules are enjoyable and the IP is cool, because if you get that both, then you get a more successful product. But so basically, the rules respecting the IP and representing the IP as best as possible is a key element. But the other thing for me is simplicity, and I've been fighting this fight for all my career to personal detriment sometimes, because I've been accused of being simplistic, to making too simple things, which for me is a slight contradiction. I don't think there is such thing as too simple, but yeah, we get into philosophical debates of what is too simple or not, or if there is such thing as too simple. But yes, that's quite a few long conversations about that. But yeah, so the idea for me is, I think the holy grail, if you want, of the design is a game where you don't think about the rules. When you're playing, your brain is thinking, what should I be doing with that unit? What should I be doing with that other unit? What should I be doing with this unit? And then I can do this, and then if I do this, it may do that, and then if I do that, I could maybe flank over there. That is what you should be thinking, not, how does that thing work again? Right, so but then that. Oh, how's that? Oh, wait, let's check. No, wait. The kind of not thinking about the rules, thinking about the game, which is so the rules should disappear in the background. The classic example, well, let's say when you play chess, you're thinking, oh, so if I take bishop and then queen, you don't think, oh, can the queen then do that? I'm not sure. Oh, I should check. That thing. So I'm trying to minimize rules to the bare minimum, and I find that makes it more accessible. A lot of people, maybe again getting older, you just can't cope with lots of rules, and So yeah, often my role, in particular when I work with other people, is they tend to do the more creative, big build things, and I go in there with a machete and go, "Is this really necessary?" No, chop. It's like, could we
Yes.
cut this rule out? Yes, chop. Uh, Classic example: bolt action morale. So there was the what if a unit breaks morale in World War II? Often in systems you have unit breaking and running away and then regrouping and coming back to some more and maybe breaking again and running away. So which often, in my experience, always creates a lot of um, kind of worms, opens a lot of kind of worms where you kind of go, all right, you must run away from the people that shot you, and then there's like a big enemy monster just behind you. You kind of go, really, towards that? No, you should avoid other things, etc. Cool. What about this way? Yeah, but we'll go that way or that way. Away from the thing and away from that, and also towards your table edge. Like, but yeah, my table edge is on the other side of the table, and there's all this enemy in the way. Kind of go, right. So, and it's kind of, it's never quite, it's very difficult to get it right, or impossible, I guess, because there's so many variables. So again, on bolt action, I went, if you fail a nerve test or a morale test, the unit is removed. Because the idea is, yeah, all right, they may later on, these men can scatter and hide, surrender, whatever, but cease being an effective fighting force for these couple of hours that the game represents. Yes, later they may regroup in the back at night and find each other again and go back the next day or something like that. But as far as this game, this snapshot of that battle is concerned, they are no longer effective. We don't care where they are, what they're doing. So remove them. So that for me is and then you don't have to worry about, oh, which direction do they flee? It's like, nope, gone, move on.
Yeah, like sometimes those rules can be so complicated. It's cool that, yeah, you can know exactly how to make this all work down the line. Sure, yeah, but then you're just crunching numbers and just following the book. And yeah, no, I like your approach where simplicity is often the best form. The more complicated you get, the more chance things are going to get broken or rules are going to be exploited or just whatever. Very cool. Yeah, even in Lord of the Rings, it's like when you fail your leadership, you just remove that model. He's gone, he's failed, he's out for the day. Simple. We've had a bunch of fun, quirky, different morale rules in 40K over the editions, from like tank rushing people and having them attempt to throw a grenade at your tank to explode it. If not, they get run over. There's been a bunch of fun kind of morale mechanics like that. But like you said, like another good kind of example of rule complexity would be back in 40K, we used to have tank angles where you'd cut out, quarter the tank, and those are the firing arcs and all that kind of stuff. Cool on paper, but just annoying to actually do in real life. Like, yeah.
Well, in a World War II, in a World War II setting, you have to have that, because actually that's reality. Tanks have heavier armor on the front, weaker armor on the side, even weaker armor on the back, and the engine is at the back. So reality means that, for example, in a World War II game, you have to have those, which probably is what influenced 40K at that edition, because again, you kind of go, yeah, that's based on reality. On the other hand, you could go, yeah, but it's a sci-fi setting, so no, the armor is the same all over the place because the Imperium says so. So you can simplify that.
Yeah, and the engine's actually in the front of the vehicle. Like, yeah,
yes. So yeah, you have more freedom in science fiction and fantasy rules than in historical rules, of course.
Yeah, I do like how you let the lore inform your rules too. Like, to me, that's the most like immersive part of it, is when like it makes sense that a unit that has this kind of background represents this on a tabletop, right? Whereas you could have like, okay, that's what it says in the lore, but on tabletop, completely different. Like, you don't even feel like you're in the same universe sometimes. So I like that you have a strong respect for the lore rule balance.
It would seem that needs to be the way around, the right way around, I guess.
It would be so interesting writing rules for 40K and even fantasy Lord of the Rings, where you have different races with all different abilities, different kind of mindsets, all that kind of fun stuff that you can then put in a tabletop. And then going to bolt action, where it's World War II, and yeah, the German army is different than the American army, but like a human's a human still, and you get shot by one bullet, you're still gonna have a
Yes.
bad time, you know.
99% of everything is a guy with a rifle.
Yeah.
Pretty much. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What color is his
Yep.
uniform? Who knows? That's
Yep.
about, yeah, you
Yep.
know. Yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of think about how you with 40K, you got all these races, and how do you even go about balancing that? Did you try to come up with like a benchmark unit for each race kind of, and then balance it from there? Like maybe the example would be like the benchmark unit for Space Marines would be a tactical squad, and then from there you kind of diverge and build up and down, and if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot speak for how they do it these days because obviously I haven't been there since 2010,
Yeah.
so 15
Whatever.
years ago.
Hey, to
But the
me,
way-
everything past like 8th edition isn't worth looking at anyways. You guys are the champs of 40K, so let's never forget that.
Right. Well, my experience of balancing army lists for different forces, whether it's historical or more so, I guess, for fantasy and science fiction, because there's more variability there, is indeed you tend to define your benchmark. And your benchmark, for example, in fantasy battle would be men. You kind of go, this is a man, this is the profile of a man, how fast it is, how tough it is, all the basic stats. And then you go, right, how is an elf different? Well, okay, it's faster, more initiative, more speed. How is a dwarf different? Well, it's lower, but it's tougher, and so on and so forth. You kind of make these core base profiles. And in 40K, indeed, I think, again, probably you go, all right, the Imperial Guardsmen being your standard, and you go, Eldar, well, how are they different? Space Marines, better at everything, kind of thing, like one line above on everything to start with. Kind of thing. So you build these different benchmarks, and then you start to, that's obviously important also for points values, because you tend to go, right, this profile is worth 10 points, for example, and you go, which again, that's kind of a very, very simplified version, guy, profile like that, 10 points, that's your model, first core models, and now what is he equipped with, what kind of special rules do they have, and obviously then you add more and more variables, and each variable has a cost implication, and of course there is no perfect system because there's too many variables. Like, how much is fear causing fear worth? It's like, well, because it depends, and so on and so forth. So there's a degree you start from a formula, but then you invariably have to adjust your calculations by playtesting and experience and your degree of experience. And there's a lot of things that you find after years of designing things is that, for example, quantity has a quality all of itself, because you always have this, I have all these seem to work, and then somebody goes, what if I take 2,000 goblins? You go, well, they should be the same as 100 Chaos Warriors, right? Because they cost the same points. You're gonna go, yeah, but they aren't.
No.
Quantity has a quality. There is a so again, it's try to make sure you don't do things too cheap, because then they can be often spawned again. They'll break your game, because again, it's also becomes impractical to play within the given time and space and stuff. So there's a lot of variables.
For sure, yeah. There's so many when it comes to 40. There's no way to balance a game like that. There's just absolutely no way.
You can try, as long as you're disciplined with your profile and your stats. And I remember part of the work I did 20 years ago was that bringing in all the profiles of everything in one big spreadsheet and comparing them, which had never been done before. And people were like, "Ooh, well, that makes no sense. Why is this guy so much more expensive?" So trying to address a bit of that was a big part of the job I did at the time, was kind of going, rebalance these things a bit more. But it's never done. That job is never done. You could do it for forever, because some of it is obvious, some of it is arguable.
And some of it is like, depending on how I set up the terrain board, that unit is gonna be more valuable or not. Like, so it's a tough thing to do.
Yes.
When it comes to kind of adding special rules for like bolt action and stuff, you mentioned, you got your stat line for fantasy, and if it's an elf, you jump it up 1 point. That's easy. In bolt action, do you kind of do that same thing? Like the Germans move 1 inch more because they're all on map? Or like, do you try to stick it maybe
Right.
to like special rules to get the flavor?
Obviously, bolt action, being historical, doesn't have the same level of variability that there is in a fantasy or science fiction setting. However, of course, you don't want it to be too sameish, because then all the armies feel the same. You want to have that degree of difference to give people this interesting, well, what's the shtick of this army? And so, well, you do that in terms of comparing different level of soldiers. The first degree there is not obviously a different race, but it's a different level of training. So you kind of go, right, these guys are experienced. These guys, we went, these are regular guys. So the benchmark is regular. Somebody who has been trained and has some combat experience. And that's your benchmark. And then you go, however, then there's the veteran, the guy that has been trained and has got a lot of experience. He knows, has learned, because he's alive, and the other guys that didn't learn are not there anymore. He has learned when to keep your head down, when not to move.
Yeah.
While the opposite is the inexperienced, the conscript guy, that actually quite the opposite. He's always standing up and he's like, down, where the veteran goes. And there is this first degree of difference, which is the level of training and experience. So inexperienced, regular, veteran, which makes them better at several things. And in fact, influences also how difficult they are to kill. So your toughness, if you want, is a reflection of how experienced you are staying in cover when you move, kind of thing. Is that makes you more difficult to kill. So you do that. The morale influence is obviously the chance of running away as well, the chance of obeying orders, because again, your units in bolt action, like in reality, sometimes don't do what you told them to do when you tell them to do, because particularly when they're under fire, there's a chance that they will just disobey completely disregard your order and just go down. Yeah. The more fire they've taken, the more likely that to happen. So that is a first degree of difference. And then you want to differentiate the armies between one another, and that's actually tricky, because what you want, bolt action is a cinematic version of World War II, but so you're trying to recreate a bit of that Hollywood portrayal, film portrayal, movie, comic portrayal of the combatants in World War II, but you have to be careful not to go over the top, because it's still in living memory, that you don't want to offend people. You don't want to say all Germans are evil and Nazis, all of them, kind of thing. All Japanese are cruel and all Italians are cowards and run away, and all the French surrender straight away.
Really go hard on
all
the
this
stereotyping there, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Americans turn up late at the end of the war, while the British, they always stop to make tea. So you can have jokes for everybody. You can actually offend everybody. So you try to go, right, no. Let's, put a degree of that, a hint of that, but trying to keep it light and try to keep it colorful without offending. So it's a tricky balance.
Yeah, I could imagine. And I can only imagine that balance has gotten even more tough in the last handful of years, as opposed to when you started your career. People get sensitive over weird shit nowadays. Do you get like that kind of hate from doing some rules? Like you do a colorful rule and...
Yes, of course, because it's World War II. Because, for example, I've been accused of trying to make the Italians, because
you're Italian.
It was like, make Italians actually, funny enough, not good enough. I was like, oh, well, you just gave negative rules. It's like, well, I mean, yes, but no. So again, how do you these strange accusations of being partial is of actually to having made Italians intentionally too bad because I didn't want to look like I was making them too good. So it was like,
oh man, that's playing some 4D chess.
You didn't think that deeply about it. Yeah.
Yes, but on the other hand, the more you remove from history, and World War II is now getting almost close to not being in living memory. There is still people that actually lived and fought in World War II, but not as many. And as time passes, obviously that becomes less. Like, for example, World War I now is, as far as I know, there's no more veterans alive, and therefore the further you go back in history, the less you have this kind of level of sensitivities. The further you go on the other direction, the more you would obviously encourage. Like, some people go, you've made a game of World War II, Warlord Games, why don't you make a game on Korean War, Vietnam War,
Yeah,
about
so no Palestine
Gulf
War
War.
coming up here. No Palestine War game.
Yeah, absolutely, all of that. So yeah, it's a subtle and difficult thing to thread on, which obviously in fantasy, science, 40k, science fiction, fantasy is definitely not as much of an issue.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
an
Like
elder coming to complain, oh, the portrayal of my race in this is not actually accurate or respectful. Like, well,
yeah, well, and then they release Primaris Marines, and then I yell about that. That's disrespectful to the old Marines. Like, yeah, you're whatever. Who cares about?
You're never gonna make everyone
Yeah,
happy.
we're just a bunch of
Especially
screaming
Mark.
internet nerds. So who cares what we think? It is cool that you kind of, that is a fun line to kind of balance. Like, how do you give these units flavor without just making them either seem overpowered or too different, or without offending somebody? Interesting.
I imagine technology and like equipment too plays a role in that. Hey,
say again, sorry?
Technology and equipment would play a role too in kind of getting variance in your units without leaning too heavily on the individual stat profile, being that they're all humans. Like,
Yes,
these guys use bolt action rifles, these guys are using machine guns and that kind of stuff.
Yes, and I, again, in the principle of simplifying, in a World War II game, you could go, well, this is a Thompson submachine gun, this is an MP40 German submachine gun. So you could write different profiles for all the different type of submachine guns that all the different forces have. But actually, again, to make the thing simple, just like have a profile, submachine gun. That's the profile of submachine gun. It doesn't matter whose submachine gun it is, and and that was again,
a bullet's a bullet, man.
And you kind of go, right. At some point, you have to kind of create brackets like an anti-tank gun. You go, right. We have light, medium, heavy, super heavy. There's 4 types of anti-tank guns, and then you have to go, right. This particular, an L75, 75 millimeter German anti-tank gun that was mounted on a Panther, where does it sit? And you kind of go, well, the caliber is here, but it was particularly well designed, a longer barrel, etc. The penetration chart seemed to imply that it actually sits here, even though the caliber may not, because other 75 millimeters are here, while here we tend to go is 88 millimeters or something like that. And you have to make those calls, which are based on partly on research, partly on anecdotes. And so it's, again, you have to make calls, and again, make those calls to simplify the game, make it more accessible.
Then the historical purists all get on your case over it. Then,
yeah, that kind of leads into my question. Like, do you guys do any conversions or anything, or is it strictly historical stuff? Like, by conversions, I'm trying to think. Like, obviously, you're not making orc tanks out there, but like maybe you're doing something a little unique, like putting some different guns on some units that shouldn't have them, and they looted them, or like what?
Well, okay, so there's a couple different points there. So there is a thing called Weird War II, where a genre, if you want, where people indeed go, oh, what if the war didn't end in 1945, but if it lasted a couple more years, all these experimental weapons, particularly the Germans were developing, and you start to go, right, okay, what about this mouse tank, which was huge with huge guns? So what if that was actually brought into production, and what would it have looked like? And so you have this Wunderwaffen, this kind of new weapons that you try to bring in. One step next is, of course, when you're going a bit to sci-fi, and there's a game called Conflict 47, which again is World War II with zombies and werewolves and that kind of
walking
one more like a Hellboy type thing. On the other end, if you let's leave aside all of this, in real World War II, historical World War II, there were indeed a degree of field conversions, as in people literally converted and experimented. And classic example, there are some examples in Europe, in the European campaign, of American troops putting bazookas on jeeps, mounting bazookas on jeeps, so creating something that eventually, I guess, today would be the same as a Humvee with the anti-tank missiles on, right? So a light vehicle, but with a strong anti-tank capability. But obviously, at the time, it was literally a guy bolting things on, etc., and trying things on a pinto mount. So there's a degree of those prototypes, if you want, and because and certainly in the game, they have far more presence, far more importance than in reality. In reality, like 2 jeeps with a bazooka over the entire World War II, or at least the western sector of European, is nothing. Yeah,
Sure.
doesn't make any difference. In the game, where every other gamer with an American army will field 2 jeeps with bazookas, suddenly you have more of these prototypes in the game that actually ever existed in reality.
Yeah.
That happens.
Okay, so there is like a
degree
little bit of that field conversion, little bit, tiny bits.
Often when based on reality, not so much
Yeah.
of stick any gun you want on any vehicle you want.
Sure.
No, we don't do that, obviously.
Yeah. No, and I like your comparison. Like even like Trench Crusade is becoming super big, and like okay, if you want World War II with demons, now go over to here where bolt action is. It's not that vibe. Yeah.
Well, there are other games that do that indeed, like
Yeah.
Trench Crusade, Conflict 47, but not bolt action.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into River Horse here for the last little bit of the show. So you said this was a company you made? Is that
yes, 2010, left Games Workshop, founded River Horse together with some other people, and we started to make games. The idea was to make our own games. We ended up doing our own games, but also services for other companies like Warlord Games, like Mantic, so where I wrote Kings of War, which in a way, when I left Games Workshop, I had these ideas for if I had free reign, what fantasy battle rank and flank game would I design starting from scratch, and what kind of sci-fi, or let's say infantry with guns with vehicles, which obviously could be 40k or it could be World War II, it doesn't matter. So that kind of scale of action, what would I do? And funnily enough, very soon I designed Kings of War for Mantic as a rank and flank fantasy battle.
Oh, you did that.
Bolt action.
Wow.
Yeah, and bolt action for Warlord Games. So those were like these are my takes, if you want, on on ranked fantasy, or historical indeed, fighting, because there's a historical Kings of War as well. This is my take on infantry with guns and vehicles and tanks kind of thing. So those were created very soon, and I always remain involved with those two, up and down through these years. And at the same time, River Horse was doing board games, mostly board games, role-play games, card games. So we went kind of away from the war games are always done as a service because they require a huge investment, of course, while smaller things like board games, card games, and role-play games is something that I did for my own company.
Yeah. Making a board game would be cool to kind of have that all in one box, everything that you need. It's all there, the rules, the minis, the dice, everything you need, and come up with that kind of nice little box design and all of that. It'd be fun to do it that way as opposed to GW, where you're really just saying you guys can start collecting whatever you want. I don't know what you're going to collect. And it's a different vibe for sure of playing. I've been playing a lot of cards with my wife lately, and that's like an even simpler level of gaming where there's not that many options with cards, but it's all in one. You can pick it up, you can play it. It's very different than 40k in that way. It's just friendly.
Yeah, a role-play game are different again and more suitable to different audiences, like the My Little Pony one you mentioned.
Yeah, what's the deal with that? So this My Little Pony Trails of Equestria, a storytelling game. How did that happen? Is that a personal project, personal passion?
That's my daughter. Yes, my daughter showed me the anime, the cartoon, sorry. And that cartoon, the latest one, Friendship is Magic, I watched it with her and it was amazing. I mean, I looked at it and was like, whoa, this is not what I remembered. I remembered plastic ponies and comms, and you have to kind of, this was like, no, thank you. But that cartoon, it is great. I mean, that series is actually very funny, cool, very heartwarming as well, with a nice deep meaning at the bottom of it, like ideas like the resolving conflict through dialogue and conversation as opposed to hate and fighting. And so there's a lot of and it's very fantasy. I remember watching the first episode and going, forest spells, manticore. It's like, wow. And so I actually watched it, and it's good fun. There's a lot of this is those clever cartoons where you have different levels, where the child enjoys a certain level, but the grown-up that is watching it with the child picks up on some other things that the kid doesn't. There's an example where one of the main characters, their having to confront these wintry demons, horses that fly in. So it's like a spirits of winter, and so basically the main character turns into the camera and goes, "Winter is coming." Which obviously, as a ground, a Game of Thrones reference, but obviously the kid goes, "Nah." But yeah, so fun, enjoyable, good message. So I went to the husband, pitched a roleplay game. It's like this fantasy, like just make a D&D but with ponies and as a younger audience. So my 6-year-old, so can I play with her and this thing? And they went for it. We did it for a few years. It was really big. Then obviously the series started to finish. So obviously it was on the road. But I mean, the license has just expired like last year, the end of last year. So it just literally just expired, which is a shame. But on the other end, the cartoon is less and less is kind of getting in the past, I would say. But so Mantic recently has acquired River Horse after working together for many years. Now Mantic Games has purchased the River Horse, the brand and the assets of it. So they transferred their license. We had the Jim Henson Labyrinth and the Crystal license, and now they belong to Mantic. And there's a new license that we also transferred, which is I'm super excited because it's a big passion of mine. And I mean, if you like 40K, is a similar kind of in a sense, it's science fiction. And I don't know if you know Ghost in the Shell. That is a Japanese animation that for me has been a big thing. I was very, very, very happy to be writing some games based on that.
Cool.
Mantic.
I love Mantic Games, man. I've bought plenty of their minis. That's cool that you're so involved with them. I also love.
Oh, more than you know.
Okay.
More than you know. There will be something in the future. Actually, we just designed Epic. Epic Warpath, the kind of a sci-fi battles on 15-10 mil scale, 15-10, something like that. Small epic scale. So I was involved with that. I haven't designed it. I started collaborating when Matt has already designed the game, but I certainly influenced it and kind of helped develop it. But now I'm starting to work on other projects for them, of course, now that I am, as I said, a free agent.
No, I love that. Jumping back to My Little Pony there for a hot second too. I love that you kind of did that with your daughter, for your daughter. You've done a couple games like that. I have a daughter, she's 5 months old, so I still got to put in some time before she can play some games with me. But this is definitely on the list of like, how do you get your girl into kind of these things? Christian himself, he's got 4 kids, 2 of them girls, and he was telling me the other day about just slowly getting the one girl into Lord of the Rings and stuff. And it's cute, man. It's so enjoyable. Just dads, girls, and very cool.
Passing on your passions to your kids.
Yes. Enjoy it while they're young. Unfortunately,
they'll stop caring.
I didn't know about that.
No, they don't even want to talk.
Different world.
Okay. So now I'm gonna transition into doing makeup just to hang out with her. Yeah, put lipstick on me. Perfect. That's what it takes.
I'm afraid it's too late. She's almost gone. Yeah. Well, they grow. At some point, they will fly off the nest.
So going into the future, do you feel like you'll always be doing something related with board gaming? Is retirement ever an option for a guy with such an interesting and cool job? How much more of your genius do we get?
Thank you.
How many more years?
Genius, wow. I was thinking after Senator Ross's, I'm going to take it easy now and do almost nothing. I'll retire. I'll be less busy. I'll have more time to do other stuff. And I actually did start to follow other venues, but often because, people kind of know some of my work, etc. I often get quite a lot of interesting projects offered to me and stuff. Like, would you like to work on this? Would you like to do this? So because I'm a magpie, I go, yes, that sounds really cool. So I ended up actually being probably more busy than I was before, but different busy. This is good busy because it's designing stuff, both in the commercial area. So I'm working with Mantic and with Warlord. So many projects, so many things. For the next few years, I'll be very busy doing those. But also, I did other things, kind of exploring more of a, I would say, artistic, spiritual, almost side of gaming. Trying some different things that are less not commercial, pure commercial things. Like I became a Freemason and joined a lodge called the Dragon Lodge, which actually does charity and charity events through gaming. So we organized events like this, which is very cool, a different way of using gaming for charity. I also worked on an artistic project in the US, which is going to be coming out fairly soon. It's a very provocative, controversial, almost like a theater production, which I was like, a theater production with wargaming? So they say, yes. So they created this stage project, which is going to open in London first, and then New York, and then probably the rest of the US. They're thinking Missouri and stuff, but which is basically it's a reenactment of the 6th of January demonstration at the Capitol. And there's a war game part where you play either as the police defending the Capitol or as the
That's the most peaceful war game of all time. The most fucking passive.
Well, it's been controversial.
I've seen
but
ads
it is what they do. It's called Fight for America.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's very different from everything else because as opposed to you normally stay away from controversial stuff. Like I said before, with bolt action, you don't want to. This is intentionally designed to make people talk about these things and talk about what do you think of that event and discuss it, even if you're different opinions of it. Of course, a lot of people, about 50% of people will have a different take on what happened there. So the idea is trying to make them engage in conversation, which I thought was a noble intent. And so, yes, I designed the game for that installation, which was very different, very outside my comfort zone.
Yeah. I just keep going back to how the fuck do you make a war game when no one died? Like, not a very violent war game is kind of what I go back to. Okay, so you got some smoke grenades. That's the one rule. Throw some of those in there, and the game's done.
It's more about getting into it's like a siege, really. It's like a siege where it's about pushing, getting access, and and there are things that, again, provocative things like one side can start to use firearms, and but if one side starts to do it, then the other side can start doing it.
Right. Yeah.
So do you want to do that? And what happens if they both start doing that? So there is provocative stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's good. They're like good conversation starters and stuff to get people talking. I totally get it. Yeah. And I guess with your experience with My Little Pony, like I imagine there's not a lot of killing in that either. So.
Friendship is magic, indeed. Remember, if everyone could resolve their differences with friendship, is great. Because in My Little Pony, for example, all the opponents in every series, they're like a big bad guy in every series. At the end of the series, 99% of the times, that creature that was the enemy in the future series is redeemed, becomes a friend, helps them, he becomes part of the team, and it is very good that you defeat them, but not by beating them, killing them, or anything like that. It's by finding out what's wrong with them. Why are they doing this? Well, why are they being evil? Why are they turning people into stone? And finding out, understanding, explaining, coming together and going, right, no, do this with us, we'll help you. And they become friends and they become an asset in the next series, which I think is lovely. And to finish off, I guess, one of the characters is like a chaos god, Discord, which is an all-powerful god of chaos. And but he's the one that breaks the rules. He's a bit like Deadpool. He kind of knows he's in a cartoon and talks to the audience and makes jokes about him being a cartoon. And so, and he's the voice actor is the same guy that plays Q in Star Trek. So again, I don't know if you're familiar, but again, the godlike creature with infinite powers. And so we gave that guy question marks in all the profile again, because he knows he's in a game. So actually, he knows he's just part of a game, so he can do whatever he wants. So yeah, I try to carry on that thing that breaks the rules from Tom Bombadil.
I love it. Well, I think that was nice. I feel like we learned a lot. Do you have anything you want to share that we didn't quite touch on? Anything burning at your heart?
No, thank you. I mean, I got to plug the Ghost in the Shell as well, which is watch that space and other stuff to do with Mantic, but I'm really, really keen to see that coming to life. It's a big passion for me.
What kind of game is that? Is it going to be like tabletop RPG?
We start with a role play game, And then if that goes down well, and more importantly, the relationship with the licensor is very important, because this is the first project we do with them, and they're in Japan, so you have to be careful not to disrespect the IP and make a very good job of it. But hopefully we'll manage to do all of that, and then if the RPG goes well, then of course there's more down the line, like board game, skirmish war game, that kind of thing. So
yeah, there's definitely some options.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye out.
Where's the best spot to kind of follow you and everything that you're up to?
Oh, there's a Facebook page called Alessio Cavatore Game Designer, where I put all the projects I work through history. So because I even myself don't remember, so it's just like when you ask me which edition of 40K did you work on, I was like, I don't remember. I think it was 4th or 5th. So I looked it up on that thing, and I've seen the cover. It's like 5th edition 40K. So I have all the projects, all the books that I'm working on that site. So that's a good place to start. But yeah, I'll be involved mostly with Warlord Games and Mantic Games. So those are the two things where my name will be mostly associated for the foreseeable future.
Well, thank you so much for making the time. It was a lot of fun chatting with you, and
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's just so neat talking to people that made something like, you made a job of it, then somehow I was able to make a job of it. Like we're all just talking about minis here, and it's pretty neat. Love it. Thanks for making the time.
That's very, very cool to hear. Very cool to hear.
All right, how do we end these shows? We say goodbye, adieu, adios, and whatever else we say at the end of these. Thanks everyone for listening.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.